Hello everyone and welcome to Olsen Wanem. In this edition we bring you part 2 of the Q&A debate on government accountability, communicating with the public. One of the issues during the Q&A was the use of social media in PNG and the emerging interaction from the younger population concerning national issues.
Social media refers to online networking done on the internet like Facebook, Twitter or blogs. These sites give you information and at the same time interacts with you directly. Regular forms of media like radio, newspaper and television are informative and more accessible. However, we can listen, read and watch, but we cannot give direct feedback or opinions at the same time. But with social media, it's different. You have the ability to communicate your opinions almost immediately.
Danny, we've seen a number of examples of how social media has played a role in shaping public discourse in other countries with great effect. But how relevant is it in PNG in terms of uptake?
Yeah, I think that's quite a good question, and I think as has been touched on by previous speakers, the uptake of social media in Papua New Guinea is directly dependent on the affordability and accessibility of the internet in the first instance. So if the ICT infrastructure isn't in place, then obviously there's no means for individuals to be recipients of a data connection and thus the online conversation that's happening. There's a bit of research out in terms of the numbers, but we're looking at about 2% of the population has a that's the penetration rate for the internet. The interesting thing about that 2%, which is a very tiny figure, is that 95% of that 2% have access to Facebook or use Facebook. So that's a significant number of individuals who do have access to the internet who are utilising social media. Furthermore, if you look at the demographics of the individuals who are using Facebook, you're looking at about 40%, which is the largest segment, aged between 18 to 24. And the next biggest segment is 24 to 35. So when you put that in the bigger picture in terms of the demographics of Papua New Guinea, I don't know whether we can say at this moment in time whether social media will improve per se government accountability, but what is most certain is that the use of social media in Papua New Guinea will only increase. As infrastructure develops, as the cost for the mobile phones, which is the primary mode of the method in terms of how Papua New Guineans access the internet, that dependency of online and the conversations happening online will only increase. And I think that's an important point for our politicians to understand, is that the future of this country is young people. I mean, we're looking at 60% of the population who's under the age of 25. So these young people are growing up with access to the internet, the know-how of how to use it, an income from the parents which is slowly increasing in terms of disposable income.
You're watching Olsen Wanem. When we return, questions from the public.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure the O'Neill government's not going to be there forever. If it changes, how do we continue and sustain the information that we want? Say a community-based information system and a radio. How do we continue that, and where is the incentive going to come from for those people who are actually going to make it work?
Thanks, Dr. Rooney. Again, I think it's all part of an evolution, for our country. And I think much of this starts with the leadership. and the system that produces that leadership. We've got to continue to work on and refine the political system, and so that how we select our leaders, who is, I guess, the qualification process perhaps, and we talk about things like the district authority, and I know it's still an ongoing discussion there which we want to bring, and part of that is to bring a bit more accountability and bring the people in authority closer to the people who are on the ground. There's too much distance at the moment between the person that's in the ground, like the district treasurer or the administrator, and the person he's responsible to. And we're trying to bring that responsibility closer through this authority structure and the JDP, that the district administrator, for example, under the JDP, can hold to account the policemen and the teachers and the public servants, and create motivation that way, because your boss is right next to you. But then, of course, at the top of that structure should be a good leader, a leader that leads by example, that is open and transparent, and is pushing in the right direction. And everything starts with the leader, if you ask me. If the leader does not lead by example, if he is continually breaching the law and trying to bypass the system and play games, no matter how many fancy structures you have, you'll never get that. But part of it comes back again to accountability. The leader he mustn't be just expected to be good out of his own inherent nature. He's also got to be held accountable to systems. And that's why it's so important we have to strengthen the Ombudsman Commission. It's so important that executive government is not all powerful. It's so important that there is a strong and vibrant opposition in the floor of Parliament, and we ask the questions and we keep pushing government. What I'm saying is that you got to get the leadership right, and it's the leadership that then drives many of these things.
There are models to get these things out to people. There are models in our neighbouring countries in Southeast Asia, and even in Australia with flexible and distance learning mechanisms. I would dearly love to see a national centre, and I don't mean build a big organisation, a national centre for lifelong learning and community development. I introduced a thing called Guinea Goa Business Development in NCD, in Moresby South, when I started, and I stepped back because AusAid helped to get it going, but it's still going. It's doing great educational stuff. Then I went to Asia Foundation, and we now have mobile buses moving right out into communities. There are models where we can get into our communities, where there's no vehicle access, the same information can be taken into community learning centres. I believe we can do it, and we must do it. I think it's absolutely critical. And using, because that's what you're asking, is it, Doctor? How can we practically get it on the ground? I believe if we really focus on that, the practicalities of getting the knowledge on the ground, there are ways, and it's been done in many countries as difficult as ours, and we've got to find ways to do it.
The more people are illiterate and the more newspapers communication goes out there, the people will understand what's happening.
After attending the mobile bus training, they feel that they are equipped. They can now go and do, especially with their visions and goals that they plan for, like starting up their own business or going to further skills training. And after completing skills training, they can set up their own business. And also, because of their interest in the program and spreading or informing their family members and other people about what we are doing in NCD. In terms of communicating the messages and especially delivering services to the people, I'd say 50%, because the bulk of the work and the work that is done by NGOs, they're reaching the community. Like people out here, they come from different communities. So to get the message across to the people, the government should look at NGOs, other NGOs apart from Guinea Goa. The
program started in Anglican because they realized giving out pamphlets, doing awareness, and most of the people they gave out pamphlets, they were just throwing them on the ground. And they asked why, and they said, we can't read what's on the pamphlet. And a good example is the financial life skills here. I asked Guinea Goa to come here because to pave way for my literacy students. Once they read and write, they can access this program. And if they cannot read and write, they're the ones that miss out. The national literacy rate for PNG, it says 56%, meaning 44% is illiterate. That's almost half of the population. Marginalized people want to be empowered somehow. If, for example, they know if you give them life skills, they come. Now you need to use that as, I will use the word as a bait to get something across. It's like a give and take thing. So if the government knows which programs are really effective and running and uses those channels, I think we would produce better things.
In answer to your question about getting information out there, SPSN has actually done a good initiative where NEFC partnered with them to put up what's called community notice board. We have something in that's working now, and then we also have 3 other allergies that we worked on. But I think the way you're mentioning, I think we need to take that type of community notice board, which is getting any government information, putting it up into some sort of a women's group or some community center where community could come and see what's happening, and maybe vital information like the Constitution, and maybe our information on publication of warrants, PR, so forth. We have social media there, which covers maybe 2%, but 98% of our population out there, I think, needs this sort of hard information out there.
You're watching Olsen Wanem. After the break, Paul Barker from the Institute of National Affairs contributes their perspective on communication, awareness and government accountability.
The Institute of National Affairs' primary role is to carry out research and disseminate their social and economic results as widely as possible to the community, government departments, statutory institutions, learning institutions, and politicians.
There's been a positive initiative this year, particularly with the Minister for National Planning and his team to be dialoguing through the CIMC process in the national and provincial development forums. So a much greater willingness than hitherto actually to be presenting government positions and responding to questions from the public. But generally, government accountability is very weak. Individually and individual constituencies, some members of parliament and officials may be performing better, particularly with the use of those district grants. But by and large, the accountability of the use of public funds over many years has deteriorated. One of the important tools is the concept of social auditing, where the local community is actually involved in the process, that they know what the money is for at their local level, and they can then actually go out and check. Has there been funds for this health facility released? Is there funds for this classroom? Does it meet the specifications? Is it there in accordance with the plans? Were those plans properly drawn up, and was the project properly allocated through a proper tender? We need a lot more accountability. We need freedom of information legislation. We need mechanisms, for example, to know what the actual incomes from the public sector of members of parliament and officials actually are, and what their expenditure and lifestyle is. Now that, at the moment, they do have to submit their leadership returns to the Ombudsman, but in many other countries that is public information, it's not private information. Now we are doing a program here with CIMC in some of the districts. Elizabeth Havisa and her team go out into the districts just trying to provide information on how budgets are meant to be put together, particularly under the DSIP, and then to inform and empower the local communities, from the big men and women, from the chiefs in some places, right through to the high school students and others who hopefully are literate, to empower them. So it's fairly empowering, but clearly one needs that program to be, if there are 89 districts around the country, we need that to be delivered in 89 districts, and that awareness program to be followed up, and we need that mechanism where you have local audit committees and all the mechanisms in place to re-establish routine systems rather than just ad hoc mechanisms. Yes, we have got some improved capabilities, some improved telecommunications, but it's still expensive. It's not very competitive.
The Open Parliament project is a project with the Speaker of Parliament. So, and we're supporting them. Transparency International and the European Union are supporting them through the Open Parliament project. So it's basically a website with a database end to it. So the website will basically have different members of Parliament on there and basic information on the legislation they voted for, attendance rates, contact details. So just providing a website and a place where people can go to find out information about their member of Parliament. In addition to that, there's an SMS component that's will be attached to it. So we're looking at the idea of people being able to text in and get back information, basic information on their member of Parliament, and so trying to create a platform for a closer relationship between the members of Parliament and their constituents. Okay, we've got all these reports and information that's produced every year, but is there a strategy and actual plan in terms of, recognizing who we're talking to? So who's the government speaking to? And there are different levels of understanding, or different levels of how people access media, or different levels of understanding of how media is presented. Social media is growing. It's already a part of our lives, so it'll only increase. And we've seen it from the competition with in the mobile phone market. With those barriers coming down, costs coming down, more competition, increase in speeds, more people will have access to this media, and so it will slowly become more important if it hasn't already. We've seen examples of it during our constitutional crisis, and even now with the asylum seeker issue. You can see the increase of activity and discussion over particular topics, and the use of social media in regards to government actions and decisions. So it's already there. It's starting and definitely will increase.
You're with Olsen Wanem. More Q&A after the break when Minister Abel gives an insight to government's responsibilities and communication strategies.
I just wanted to ask a question to Minister Abel. My question is, as part of your planning and so forth, are there any plans or policies for communication strategies within the organizations themselves? And in rolling out communication strategies, are there reporting facilities for that in terms of the different types of medium, the different channels you use? Who are the target audience that you're looking at? Okay, as Dame Carol said, people down in the street, the ones in the urban centers that are on the internet, the ones that only listen to radio.
I must say that the emphasis for government has been on getting the framework in place per se. We say we have lots of reports, and I think I'll come back to the point, one of the points is that many of those reports are expenditure driven. They tell you where the money has gone, what check's been raised and where it's gone. but most of our reporting is not outcome driven. We don't know, once the money disappears down the tube, there's not much coming back this way in terms of what has happened. We acknowledge that, but as I say, in the first instance, what we're trying to do at planning is get that monitoring and evaluation framework up and running. We're slapping everybody on the wrist and say, stop thinking that you're a bank, stop thinking and empowering yourselves and parking money in planning. That's not your job. Your job is to get down and let the money go, receive the plans, look at them, they've been vetted properly, and then you fund those plans through the budgetary process, and then your job is to then get down and get busy on following up what has been done. Demanding the reports from the various sectoral coordinating agencies, because as I come back to this point, we're trying to reorganize government properly into the sectors. We're trying to make sure that not only planning, but the sectoral coordinating agencies are also doing what they're supposed to be doing. The structure of government is confused and convoluted and dysfunctional. What happened was that when all this money poured into the system, after the mineral boom in the last 10 years, all of a sudden we had this money pouring in that we've never seen before. And it was very opportunistic or opportune for people like finance and planning ministers and so on to start parking that money under their own agencies. And what that tended to do was that everyone got distracted. It was like a big party. All of a sudden you had this big swimming pool of funds which you had huge discretion over. And naturally they dropped the bundle and stopped worrying about reporting and monitoring, and they all just got busy dishing the money out amongst their friends. And you'll see that as we try our best to get the reports now and find it very difficult to produce the reports because people are not doing their job. The reports I've been producing, many of these programs are 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. Never ever had a report. I've come in as a minister, and 12 months we're starting to produce these reports. People get up and tell me, oh, it's incomplete. I said, of course it's incomplete, because the whole system has fallen over. But it doesn't mean I stop from starting. So we're in a very, very big process of trying to rebuild and get everybody back to what they should be doing. Public servants and all that, they all lost sight of what they're supposed to be doing. They forgot about the rural areas. You got all the paper farmers running around here. The planning minister, all powerful with a checkbook. We're all going to come back and revisit the principles of governance and the principles behind the use of public funds. And where's the accountability? It comes down to that basically. The primary thing we're concentrating on is actually putting the system in place and just tuning the reports so that they tell us what has happened to the money. We know billions of kina have gone out. We know certain companies picked up the checks. But what did they do with that money is what we don't know. So we've got reams and reams of reports, but we've got to look at the formatting and get this monitoring framework in place. And I've got to get my auditing team and working together with the Auditor General's office and OID and get me the reports. I want to know what happened with all this money. Then once we're starting to produce those reports, we're going to start thinking more about communicating it. But that's been my focus. But of course, we have to think about the communication side of it as well. That's where Communication Minister comes in, and Kundu too, and let's roll out NBC and roll out Digicel and get these things in a format that people can have access to.
My point is this, and this is something that's frustrated me since I got into Parliament. And it frustrated me before I got into Parliament. The fact is, we have reports galore. Nothing happens after we receive these reports. I mean, I sit on the Public Accounts Committee and I'm looking at these reports that are coming from the AG's office, usually 5 years after they've happened. And substantial amounts of money have been pilfered and stolen and just blatantly misappropriated. What's happening to the people who are committing these crimes? You know, I mean, the Planning Minister has presented in this short time, I think 3 major reports, and the total amount of monies that have been misappropriated, they're almost $1 billion. And what's going to happen to these characters? We all know them, you know. We know exactly who they are. They're not mysterious characters that live in another country, or some do, you know. But in this instance, we really know who they are. And what I've come to conclude is that nobody wants to take the garbage out. Nobody wants to get their hands dirty. Everybody wants to be a nice guy, you know, and they're all very diplomatic and shake hands and say very meaningful, diplomatic things that just don't really mean anything. But who is prosecuting these characters? Who's taking them to court?
That's all we have time for on Olsen Wanem. Thank you to all expert panel members involved. Special recognition to AusAid through the Economic and Public Sector Program. If you want to explore more information on any of the topics discussed from this Q&A, you can refer to the website addresses showing on your screen. For your next edition of Olsen Wanem, we bring you the National Mask Festival. For the first time was held in Kimbe, West New Britain. For now, enjoy the rest of your viewing on your #1 station, MTV.